I'm here at the Veterans for Peace Annual Convention. We just finished up a Korean War workshop and also the very final panel. I'll be speaking about my recent trip to Korea. We know that tensions are escalating on the Korean Peninsula and the surrounding region, and we wanted to send, on a low budget, we couldn't send too many people, but we wanted to send some hopefully influential people to South Korea to learn about the situation going on there. And we essentially had three main goals or even demands. And one of those was to remove this anti-missile system called THAAD, T-H-A-A-D. It's a missile system designed to shoot down incoming missiles, say from North Korea or China or wherever. So that was the first demand, to remove that, because that is incredibly destabilizing, and I can talk about that more here in a little bit. But the second one was to end the war games that happen every year on the Korean Peninsula between the US and South Korean militaries, which some have considered the largest military training exercises in the world. So clearly this can be threatening and provocative to other countries, say to North Korea. And the third one is to get the countries, especially the superpowers like the US and of course North Korea, to sit down and engage in talks and to, like Trump said, hopefully have a hamburger together with Kim Jong-un. And as well as getting South Korea and China together, and even Japan, to sit down and have these talks, because these tensions can escalate to devastating consequences that will affect everyone on the planet for sure.
While you were there, what other organizations and activists did you interact with, and what was that like?
Yeah, so our delegation were made up of 5 people. Only 4 people got into the country. One of them was had a ban put on her last year that continues through the rest of this year. Her name is Ju Yeon Ri. She is part of the STIC task force. She's a Korean American, actually born and raised in Korea, but she's now a US citizen. So she can't even go into her home motherland country, right, of South Korea. I think it's because, the South Korean government, has a history of cracking down on activists and organizers. But the other 4 was Jill Stein from the Green Party, US, Medea Benjamin, who is a co-founder of Code Pink, Women for Peace, and Reese Chenault from US Labor Against the War, and myself representing Veterans for Peace. But after 2 days, we drove down to Gimcheon, and we met with the wide variety of people who are opposing the THAAD anti-missile system, from the local Buddhists that are called One Buddhists, to the local villagers who live there that don't want it there in their backyard, to the same organizations like KCTU, who are kind of really leading the way down at the site. And we got to participate in a large solidarity march with maybe 1,000 people of various organizations. We had music. And we actually, one of my favorite parts of that is they made a huge model of the THAAD missile system. And they got a couple people to just basically smash it down to pieces as a huge symbolic sign that they don't want the system there in Gimcheon, or really anywhere in South Korea. That was really fun. North Korea has said that it doesn't want that in South Korea, but really more so China and Russia there's been more outcry from China and Russia than North Korea about that. The reason is because THAAD is made up of a system essentially of interceptor missiles and a radar. So the radar is, theoretically, it's made to detect incoming missiles, and you shoot an interceptor missile at the incoming missile, which then you can stop any attacks from North Korea, essentially. But this has been proven to be wrong. THAAD stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. Now, I said high altitude. Why would North Korea, in order to shoot any missiles at South Korea, why would it have to go to a high altitude to do it? It's connected to it. They would only use short-range missiles to do so. So right off the bat, THAAD is not there to protect the South Korean people. And the second thing is the radar. the radar encompasses China and Russia, which can be used as surveillance, which is a direct threat to China and Russia's national security. So this THAAD system is making it a regional issue. And China has hundreds of nuclear weapons and Russia has thousands of nuclear weapons. If we are threatening their national security by surveillance and with a so-called anti-missile system, THAAD, they're definitely not going to want to talk about denuclearizing. So, and it's only going to proliferate nuclear weapons in the region. And this THAAD, and David Sanger from the New York Times posted an article earlier this year where he reported on reports that came directly from the Missile Defense Agency that stated that these missile defense systems, from the SM-3 to the PAC-3 to the THAAD, if you add it all together, it's a 56% failure rate. And we're spending billions of dollars on this stuff every year for something that we don't even know that's going to help us. At the same time, if a missile is shot from North Korea, they can do what's called missile decoys, where instead of shooting just one warhead, they can shoot several, and only one or two of them are the real warheads. The THAAD system and the radar cannot detect which one's real and which one's not. And the THAAD system in South Korea only has, will have shortly 48 interceptors. North Korea could easily make hundreds of missile decoys, and we wouldn't know which one's the real warhead. And missile decoys are extremely inexpensive compared to actual warheads. So THAAD can be easily defeated. It doesn't protect the South Korean people, and a lot of South Korean people don't even want it in the first place. And also earlier this year, former Secretary of Defense William Perry, who served under Bill Clinton in the 90s, he came out earlier and said that THAAD doesn't work, and that too, we shouldn't force it on the South Korean people if they don't want it.
Oh wow, that's great. Yeah.
I think you can do too.
Yeah, it's from our coalition of THAAD.
Awesome. Thank you.
I was born on a foreign military base in West Germany during the 80s, the height of the Cold War. After 3 years, I moved to South Korea, another country split by war. So my first 8 years were, in countries split by, military conflicts. Age 19, in 2004, I joined the U.S. Army myself, became a paratrooper. I was in for 5.5 years. So I was in Iraq when Bush announced the surge, and I was in Afghanistan when Obama announced the surge.
Education, not militarization. Education, not militarization.
I got out in 2010, went to college, and I majored in what's called global studies, but I focused on U.S. foreign policy, specifically in the Asia-Pacific region. So I learned a lot about Chinese and Korean history and U.S. foreign policy in those areas. Graduated in 2014. That last year, I found Veterans for Peace, became passionate about Veterans for Peace's work, loved their mission statement. And in 2015, I began doing delegations. So for the past year and a half, I've been to South Korea 3 times. I've been to Okinawa twice. I've been to India, Nepal. Earlier this year, I was in Palestine. Late last year, I was in Standing Rock, also the Sable Trail Pipeline Resistance in Florida. And now I'm on the board of directors of Veterans for Peace and the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. We learned about the organizing a lot that is going on in South Korea. And it's very interesting to learn, especially from a U.S. perspective, where many social movements are divided and not connected with each other as much as South Korea is. The South Korea also started off with a military dictatorship, which was actually overtaken. And so it was going through democratizing its country as well as capitalizing its country. And the whole time, the past 65 years, it's been at war with North Korea. And really, the U.S. is involved too. The U.S. is still at war with North Korea as well. So this rapid transformation has created all these social movements, the labor movement, the peace movement, even students who are encouraged to participate, university students who are encouraged to participate in any type of just protesting and organizing. All of these things, we met labor unions, peace movements, students, mothers, women, all fighting together on particular issues. And the latest issue has been the THAAD missile defense system, which is really destabilizing the region, is being provocative not only North Korea but also to China, because the THAAD system includes a radar that can encompass much of China and even parts of Russia. And both China and Russia and North Korea together have spoken out saying that they don't want this here, and it's certainly not going to help denuclearize the region, right? I mean, North Korea is not going to want to do that if the U.S. keeps sending new missile systems there and keeps doing the constant threats that it's been doing for over 65 years. I mean, let me put it this way. Maybe 2 months ago, the U.S. did a nuclear bomb dropping drill on the border of North Korea. In the U.S., that's not considered a provocation. I mean, could you imagine if North Korea did something like that on the coast of California? I mean, we'd be at war, obviously, already. Not to mention the 83 U.S. bases we have in South Korea, or the 30,000 plus troops we have in South Korea, or the tons of warships and aircraft, military aircraft that we have in the entire Asia-Pacific region, essentially all pointed at North Korea. And we're building alliances with Japan and South Korea, again, all pointing at North Korea. If North Korea tried to build one military base in Mexico, we'd be at war. The Pentagon would not have it. If they did a nuclear bomb dropping drill, we would not have it. We would be at war. So I mean, let's look at North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, and see how, he is kind of acting a little rationally, and he is making his own threats, but North Korea is really, honestly, I think from one of the main things we learned is that North Korea is simply surviving. And you know what? It has survived for over 65 years against U.S. foreign policy in the region. Libya didn't make it. Iraq didn't make it. Syria is going through problems right now. Maybe North Korea is actually there because it is developing nuclear weapons. It hasn't used any. And I like to remind people that the only country to actually use nuclear weapons on a population is our own country here, the U.S. Right?
Maybe you can give some context to the longer history of U.S. Korean, North Korean relations.
So, I mean, I think a good starting point is 1950 to 1953 when the Korean War happened, which was completely devastating North Korea. The U.S. Carpet bombed the entire country, all of its infrastructure, including committing war crimes such as bombing the dams, the water infrastructure. But in the end, despite all that, North Korea survived with the help of China and Russia as well, the Soviet Union back then. And since 1953 to today in 2017, the U.S. on a daily basis has threatened North Korea with a nuclear strike. So the North Koreans are living, daily under threats of nuclear warfare. That does something to an entire country, to where they have to militarize themselves and protect themselves. And if you look at the past 16 years of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, I mean, look, just last year alone, we bombed 7 countries, dropped over 26,000 bombs in 1 year. And these the drone programs have expanded, and much of the casualties have been civilians. And North Korea knows all of this. They read the papers. They know what the U.S. foreign policy is doing all around the world. We have 800 bases around the world, and we've been at daily war for almost 16 years now. And then now we got this crazy guy in office, Trump, who just recently said that made a threat towards North Korea that he would make it fire and fury like the world has never seen before, which is completely ridiculous. So you have these two guys that are just facing off with each other. I don't think they realize that the whole world is going to be affected if North Korea and the U.S. go to war. And nuclear, if we use nuclear weapons, clearly we will, the whole world will suffer. Nuclear winter and all that, right? But if you look at the region, 2 of the 3 largest economies in the world is China and Japan. They were they are inevitably going to be drawn into this conflict if war breaks out on the Korean Peninsula. So we're talking, and some of the world's busiest ports are in the Asia Pacific. South Korea is a powerhouse too, like the 12th largest economy in the world. And clearly the U.S. going to another war in another region is going to affect our economies here at home. So I mean, this is going to have an effect on the global economy, as well as the the environment of the planet in which we live with the nuclear warfare. So the history is also showing us how, one is showing how bad it can go with it, especially the past 16 years, or even taking U.S. foreign policy of all of our history as a country. But the good thing is that we know what we can do. North Korea, China, and even Russia has stated for years, even decades, that they want to sit down, they want to have peace on the Korean Peninsula. But the one person the one country that keeps refusing is the U.S. consistently, and that's something that's not put out in the mainstream media. The U.S. refuses to sit down and have talks. And North Korea even voted in the recent UN nuclear ban treaty vote that they wanted to ban nuclear weapons. They can't do it alone. We have to get the superpowers to sit down, like especially the U.S., and talk this out because, like I said, everyone's going to be involved with this.
What would you speculate is the cause of the U.S.'s continued opposition to peace and to the North Korean government?
The real reason has always been China. China has a huge population. It has a history of being a highly civilized society. And from the Western point of view, that's markets, cheap labor, people to sell to. And it's always been like that. And if people want to look up a quick history, check out what's called the Century of Humiliation. So China, 1839 to 1949, they consider that the century of humiliation, of national humiliation, where Western powers, specifically the British Empire, but more so even the US and other Western powers, they essentially carved it up like a melon. They carved China up like a melon to where they had access to its ports, so then they could sell things like opium. The British Empire was growing opium in India, and they were selling it to Chinese people, forcefully selling it to Chinese people, because they know they had a huge market there. Hundreds of millions of people at the time. Today, it's like 1 billion people, right? That's a huge market. And we want to have access to that. America depends on China for this stuff. But now it's getting to the point where the U.S. is using the military to forcefully have access to that. That's why you've seen maybe over the past few years disputes over the South China Sea, which 40% of the world's trade goes through. But the thing is, the U.S. can't just say, hey, China's the boogeyman and we need to go after them, because we need access to their markets. They're building all our things and we don't pay them that much, and we don't care about their health standards and anything about them. We just want them to make it as cheap as possible and send it back to the Western world, right? Almost everything we have is made in China. But in order to have the military, again, we need to have a boogeyman, and North Korea fits that picture perfectly. And ending the war games and the aggressive policies towards North Korea will eventually create peace on the Korean Peninsula. It's a win-win, and also will help save money here in the U.S. and invest in Americans and infrastructure and jobs and healthcare and education. There's so very many things that we need to invest in, and that's pretty much where our delegation coming back have come to realize that we need to start pushing for this peace treaty now more than ever. And North Korea's nuclear weapons and its program are only developing more day by day. But as of right now, we don't really know that they can hit the U.S. with a nuclear warhead, or if they can even miniaturize a warhead where it can travel to the U.S. at all. But the main two things is to end the annual war games and to stop the aggressive policies that they have toward North Korea. Again, this shows that North Korea just wants to survive. It doesn't want to be invaded. It sees what the U.S. has done in the Middle East. But the U.S. absolutely refuses to stop threatening them with nuclear weapons, which is ridiculous. And these annual war games that are costing so much money, our military is already Over 50% are discretionary budget, but it's actually like more like $1 trillion a year that we spend, because there's a lot of things like nuclear weapons and energy that we don't consider part of that military budget. So I mean, ending the war games ending the war games and the aggressive policies towards North Korea will eventually create peace on the Korean Peninsula. It's a win-win, and also will help save money here in the U.S. and invest in Americans and infrastructure and jobs and healthcare and education. There's so very many things that we need to invest in.